It is a beautiful day in this wonderful neighborhood here on League Unlocked. My name's Eric. Thank you guys for joining us as we continue to preview MSI 2019. We still got just under a week until action actually gets going, and you know the playing stage, it's a lot of teams that people are not as familiar with, a lot of names people are not as familiar with. There's usually some great games, some upsets that people aren't expecting, but today we're going to go through a key player on all 8 of the play-in group stage squads that you need to keep your eye out for, and they're going to be key win conditions for their squads. Before we do that, let's look again at these group draws and what the groups are actually looking like. We know that Group A is completely stacked with probably the 2 best teams in the entire tournament in Fangvu and Fenerbahce, so you know Group A is going to be a real barn burner. Group B, very much wide open for who wants to come out in that top spot and advance to the knockout round against Flash Wolves. Probably between INTZ and Detonation Focus Me for that final spot, but both those squads have a legit chance, but not in a loser's match if they go up against Fangvu or Fenerbahce. We'll start with Group A and go through some of the key players on those rosters because they are the more experienced and probably the higher quality or caliber of players. And a couple of these guys we've already talked about. Mark and I both have on our earlier preview shows because they're the most exciting guys that you want to keep your eye out for. And of course, we got to start with Fangvu Buffalo. There's a couple of guys that, I mean, the entire roster is the same from their Worlds 2018 run, and just like that World Championship, it's Zeros in the top lane. Again, we've talked about him a few times, about his incredible solo kills, which I'll say one more time, 31 in 32 games. Absolutely disgusting. But we saw him go toe-to-toe with some of the best in 2018 already, and another split under his belt. This guy is still only 18 years old. He turns 19 this year, but that is absolutely insane that he's already got a Worlds run under his belt. Now he's going to MSI, and it was another split of pure domination out there in Vietnam. He loves playing carry champions, as is a theme here that you're going to see for top laners, because that's the meta that we've seen here early in Season 9. We'll see if the tank picks come back into fruition with the new patch that they will be playing on at the Midseason Invitational, but I still expect a lot of top laners to be busting out the carries, and for Zeros in particular, he loves that Irelia pick. 7-1 on the champion. Obviously, Fangvu only lost 3 times in the entire regular season and had a pretty dominant playoff run, so he's undefeated on multiple different champions, but that Irelia is one of his staple picks in that top lane, and really one of the key things to look at amongst all of these top laners that prefer playing carries is how well they can play something like the Sylas, because the top tier guys, you're going to see that be a flex that's going to the top lane more so than the mid lane, and Zeros is definitely one of those guys who you're not afraid of him picking up the man who is unshackled in Sylas in that top lane, and that's going to definitely be a pick that we'll be seeing throughout the tournament for the best top laners. Again, some mid laners might pick it up, but for Zeros, he'll be throwing it in the top lane. Fangvu love to play around him in that role in the early game and get him rolling because he can take over a game. So make sure you're checking out those top lane matchups whenever Fangvu Buffalo are on the Rift. And really, throughout this play-in stage, as you're going to see, there's a lot of solid top laners where they are the main emphasis for their squad, and that is something we don't see that often, but here in Season 9, with so many carry tops being picked throughout the entire split, it's a theme. A lot of teams are playing through that top lane island, and one of those teams that is also doing that is Fenerbahce, the champions out of the Turkish league. We know Ruin had a great split for them, but they had the MVP of the entire league on that squad, and it is Kirei. Him and Ruin had a fantastic synergy going throughout the entire split. I think they were far and away the best top jungle duo in the Turkish scene. They went toe-to-toe with Supermassive throughout the entirety of the split, including those grand finals, but the top half of the map was definitely there for Kirei. And this is a guy who you might be familiar with. You've heard his name around the pro scene for multiple years now. Since 2015, he's been playing on different teams. He's played on a bunch of EU Challenger squads. He's kind of a guy that's never fully lived up to the potential or the hype that people have had for him. In 2016, he went to North America. He played on Dignitas when they were, still a team in the LCS, and had underwhelming results there, didn't quite live up to expectations. He was on that PSG, Paris Saint-Germain roster that had tons of hype with Yellowstar as a coach, a couple of Korean imports. Didn't end up qualifying for the LCS, but they still had one of the greatest intro rosters that we've seen in a while. He also played on Dark Passage last year in the TCL. He's 22 years old. He's been around for a long time. So it might seem like he's done, his career's over, but he is still relatively young. Excited to see him on an international stage. And I know coming into this season, he tweeted that he was ready to, really make people proud of him, the people that have believed in him for so many years, and I think he did more than that with, insane flash plays like that. He loves playing Karthus, as pretty much everyone did anywhere in any European region. Karthus jungle is a heavily contested pick, and I expect him to be busting it out multiple times here in MSI playing stage. But again, him and Ruin were the key players that were taking games over for Fenerbahce, along with Bolulu, the rookie mid laner. But if Kirei has a fantastic performance, then maybe they can take down Fongvu and become that top seed out of Group A and earn the right to play Team Liquid in a best-of-5 series. Obviously, any of these squads in a best-of are going to be huge underdogs against Liquid, but we've seen NA teams struggle before at this point in MSI. Talking about the Marines versus TSM circa 2017, of course. But Kirei, for all the people that have doubted him, all the haters that have surrounded him throughout the entirety of his career, basically, this is a perfect opportunity for him to prove them all wrong and deliver on the international stage and get that top seed out of Group A. Coming up after the break, there's a couple of other squads in Group A, and it's a pair of Koreans that completely dominated the OPL scene. We're back. It's League Unlock. I'm Eric, and you guys are wonderful. We continue the preview hype train ahead of MSI 2019. I know everyone's just waiting for that main group stage with all the big name teams and players, but make sure you watch the play-in stage, because last year we had some incredible games, some hilarious moments, and some pretty big upsets where you had the favorites not even getting out of the group stage. So we know Group A is stacked, but who knows? Maybe somehow Isurus Gaming or someone else comes up with the upset and takes that top seed in Group A. But today we are previewing the players you need to watch, one for every single team of the 8 teams in that play-in stage. We're still in Group A, and now we're moving on to Isurus Gaming. And you might think we're talking about Seiya, because he is the staple Latin North American player. He's been around for so many years and a mainstay at these international events, but we're actually talking about his right-hand man. It's Oddie in the jungle. He came over with him from Rainbow 7 onto this new ISG lineup, where they went through a miracle run through the playoffs. Again, they finished 4th in the regular season and just plowed their way through to that grand finals. And this guy he's a supportive jungler who's actually played a lot more carries and damage-oriented guys that we saw this split. That's why he's got such a high kill share. But usually he's there just hovering around his boy Seiya and just making sure that he's doing all right. He's getting ahead in his lane. He loves playing the Jarvan. He loves playing the Olaf, the Sejuani, any of these tanks where he can kind of just be there for his team and not necessarily be the one who's getting super fed. And those were his top 2 played, RJ4 and Olaf. He didn't have a great win percentage on that Jarvan, so we'll see if he strays away from it here at MSI, but he really played at another level throughout their playoff run and is one of the key cogs as to why they were able to take down R7 in that best of 5 in the grand finals. We know there's some insane rivalries between him. We saw it versus Tierwolf at MSI last year, where they were both just in one of the most insane games, going head-to-head, battling and taunting one another on the Rift and off the Rift. Tierwolf was yelling across the venue at Oddie, but no Tierwolf here at this tournament. Oddie is the lone jungler from the Latin American scene, and we're expecting, again, we would be expecting more out of this squad and Oddie in particular if they weren't in Group A, but I'm really excited to see Oddie versus Kirei, probably the two best junglers in this group, and obviously, you know, the matchup with Fongbu as well, but more so Kirei and Oddie in that jungle matchup, and he's going to have his hands full. Obviously, this is much stiffer competition than what they're accustomed to seeing in the LLA, but maybe if Isurus can come through with a semi-Cinderella run, it's going to be through Oddie and, of course, Oddie and Seiya playing well in that duo tandem that we've seen for multiple years now that they've been playing together. The final team in Group A is the Bombers from the OPL, who have, I mean, it would be an incredible run for them to finish first. It would be an absolute Cinderella miracle run for them to do that. They had a whole new roster here coming into 2019, dominated the OPL spring split, and one of the main reasons why is because their Korean duo of imports that came in and completely smashed the scene. Mimic and BalKhan got MVP and Rookie of the Split respectively. They were far and away the best top half of the map in the OPL. I mean, you just look at the categories, pretty much first across the entire board for them. And Mimic is a guy in the top lane who, he's been around for a couple of years. You haven't really heard of him. He played on, well, he was a sub on KT Rolster in 2015, never played a game. He played on Esbenu before they were relegated and no longer a team in Korea. So he has played on some smaller tier teams in the Korean scene. He's also played overseas. Before this year, he played on Legacy eSports, so it's actually his second year here in the OPL. So he has been around a little bit. BalKhan, this is his first professional team scene. He's got no history of playing any stage games before this, which very much qualifies him for Rookie of the Split, and that's why he earned those honors. I mean, he had a fantastic, he was the best jungler in the OPL, and Mimic was the best top laner. He loves playing Kennen, by the way, 7-0 on that champion. If that's available and he's comfortable in the matchup that he's going up against, he will pick that Kennen, that crazy lightning Pikachu Yordle, into pretty much any matchup and do extremely well. Some completely game-changing team fights we know that he's capable of. If the Bombers have any chance of making a run or even winning a couple of games here at this MSI play-in stage, it's going to be through the play of Mimic and BalKhan in that top side of the map. That's it for Group A. We go on to Group B, where we talked about it's much more up in the air who the favorites are going to be, but it's either going to be DFM from the Japanese scene or maybe INTZ. But for Detonation, Focus Me, the man to watch is in the top lane, as a lot of these teams have. We already talked about heavy emphasis. It's Evie, who you might be somewhat familiar with because we have seen him internationally already at the 2018 Worlds play-in stage, where DFM matched up against Cloud9. They almost got a win, and the meta back then for top laners, as you remember, was just play Urgot over and over and over, maybe throw in an Aatrox here or there, but mostly you're playing a whole lot of Urgot. But we talked about DFM, by the way, completely crushed the LGL this year, went 20-1 in the regular season, clean 3-0 in the playoffs against Unsold Stuff Gaming, so they completely dominated the scene. Obviously, the Japanese scene not nearly as competitive, that's why it's a minor region, but you still can't understate just how well they played this split, and Evie, one of the main reasons why. Ramune and Seros in the mid lane, they actually split games 13-8 in favor of Seros, the Heimerdinger god, but Evie is the main carry on this squad. And now that Kale has become meta, he was completely popping off on that champion. Obviously, his two most played were Vlad and Silas, and we talked about Silas kind of being a test to how good a top laner can actually be to be able to play that champion at a high level. He hard carried some games on Vladimir. I think if you're matching up against DFM in the play-in stage, you are going to be throwing at least 2 to 3, maybe even more bans in that top lane, because Evie has the capabilities to completely take over some of these games. So I'd be scared. And for any of your scouting that you're doing against this Japanese squad, make sure you're paying attention to the top lane, because Kale might just run amok and cost you a couple of games. And as we know, a couple of games in the group stage at MSI can mean the end of your tournament. Coming up after the break, the rest of the teams from Group B, who can stand out, who can stand up, and earn their team a spot in the knockout round. Welcome back to League Unlocked. My name's Eric. Thank you guys so much for joining us as we preview MSI 2019. You're probably not familiar with most of the play-in teams, and that's why we put in a little bit of research and give you a player to watch out for each of the 8 teams. Only 3 teams left. We're over into Group B now, and Detonation Focus Me might be the favorites to get out of this group, but I would not sleep on INTZ out of Brazil. If this was Flamengo eSports, people would be talking about them being the big favorites, but INTZ took them down, and the man who allowed them, really hard carried them through that series, was Envy in the mid lane. He had an absolutely incredible series run for them. In that best of 5 alone, he had an 8.3 KDA and over 31% of his team's damage, and he was also the MVP of the 3 games that they did win in that series. He really turned it up to another level throughout that playoff run, and he's got a very complex and diverse champion pool. He didn't play anyone more than 4 times this entire split, and he made some seriously game-saving plays in, again, all 3 games that they won. Even one of the games they lost is when he locked up a pentakill to try and delay that game. So he was the clear mismatch in that mid lane. He completely dominated Goku on Flamengo in that matchup, and he led them here, I think, in this Group B. I don't know if it's the strongest of mid laners that is going to be going up against. So he is the key for this INTZ squad to hopefully finish in that top spot. It's going to be through him to completely dominate a lot of those mid lane matchups, because again, he did it in the finals. He did it when the pressure was at the highest. Look at this Rise pentakill. They're on to the Nexus turrets, and they're ready to end the game, and he completely saves it with a pentakill. Even when BRTT is pretty fed, it doesn't matter, because the Rise is even more fed. Does that to save the game. He turned the game around on the LeBlanc. What's incredible is all these highlights, all these huge key moments in this series, he's playing a different champion every single time. He snowballed that LeBlanc out of control to win them that game, and he had a couple of huge... He has this pocket pick in Ahri that not many people are playing right now. He had a couple of huge charms to catch out BRTT when he was crazy fed on that Lucian to get them back into that game. They were losing in Game 5 up until those couple of picks. You saw Flamengo was pushing to get an inhib, and the Ahri picks get them back into the game. They eventually close it out. Here they are at MSI. If they want to finish first, it's going to be through Envy playing at the same level that he did in that playoff run. And if he does, I think we'll definitely be talking about INTZ and how well they match up against Flash Wolves in that knockout round, because I don't think anyone matches him in that Group B. The other teams, though, in Group B, we've got the Mega eSports out of the LST, where the regular season is very confusing out there, because the regular season consists of basically 5 games. So there's not tons to go off of. It's just a semifinal playoff bracket right away. But we do know something about Rockky in the top lane for them, because we've seen him before on Ascension Gaming, and we've seen Ascension at a couple of international events, and I would say overall underwhelming results. So I'd say I'd be surprised if these guys got out as the top seed in Group B. But Rockky had a great run through the playoffs. He had super solid. I mean, 9 KDA in 5 games is great. No other top laner, by the way, in those games in playoffs had more than 1.5, 1.6. So he completely smashed both of his matchups. Obviously, they went 2-0, 3-0, and I mean, the numbers are insane. He completely crushed and destroyed them all. And he played. This is a change of playstyle for him, because in 2018, he was playing a lot of tanks, and I know that that's the meta shift, but it was a lot of Ornn, a lot of Cho'Gath, and Maokai, and now he's playing pretty much whatever he wants. He's loving that Hecarim is meta in the top lane, playing some Kayle now, the Sylas, obviously. So a lot of it is to do with the meta, but I think he's looked much more solid here on these carry champions. And even the odd time on Ascension when he would play something like the Camille in that top lane, I think the team looked a lot more comfortable when he was getting leads by himself and kind of snowballing the game. And then they had a clear lane that they could play around. So I think that that's going to be the secret to them to have any success here. But the problem is there's a lot of other solid top laners in this tournament. Luckily for Mega, it's mostly on the other side of the bracket in that Group A, where you have probably 3 of the best top laners in the entire tournament. So he's got that going for them. It'll be interesting to see him match up against Evie, though, on that DFM versus Mega eSports matchup. I still favor Detonation Focus Me and Evie, but this is the time to prove that your region is for real, even though when you haven't played that many games. So Rockky, the key guy for Mega, if they want to come up with the Mega upset and advance to that knockout round. And just like that, the final team, the 8th team in the play-in stage, is Vega Squadron out of the LCL in Russia. It's not Gambit. It's not Elements Pro, who completely destroyed the regular season. And it's definitely not Vivictus that's going to be playing here, thankfully for anyone who watches any of the games. But it is Vega Squadron. There's a couple of guys to look out for. No Man's in their mid lane, but I want to talk about Gadget in the bottom lane, because this guy has some insane picks that he goes through in that bottom lane. We've seen a couple of guys. I mean, we saw Kirei playing Veigar and Zoe in that bottom lane, which was a huge shock against Fnatic in the playoffs. But that's not out of the ordinary for him. And you see the first blood rate here. They play around the bottom lane a lot in the early game to get him snowballing on some of these mages. He plays Cassiopeia, Mordekaiser, Veigar, just like Kirei, and one of his favorite picks seems to be that Karthus in the bottom lane. Vega Squadron doesn't roll that out in the jungle. They run it down in the bottom lane. And by the way, he's 3-0 on that champion with a cool 25 KDA. So if anyone does their homework on this squad, you know they're going to be banning the Karthus against them, not because of the jungle, but because this man is an absolute unit on the Karthus. He's trained well in pressing the R button and seems to have mastered it to an entirely new level. Vega Squadron, I think they're pretty close between Vega, and Mega, who's going to finish at the bottom of the groups here. And so I'd be surprised. I mean, we didn't think Gambit would really have it to finish first in the group, and they did in 2018 MSI, but I feel like this Vega squad is even a little bit weaker coming into that matchup, so don't expect them to get out of groups there in Group B. Technically, Liquid and Flash Wolves are also in the play-in stage, so if you had to pick a player from there to watch, it would be Betty on Flash Wolves, because he's one of the same guys from 2018, and you remember how well he performed in that group stage. We'll see if he can keep that up, and probably Impact for Liquid, because it's an international stage and he's going to have to play some carries. We'll see how he stacks up against some of the very best, although if Liquid doesn't get out of the knockout round, they have 2 chances, by the way, then there's a whole lot of different issues with that squad. MSI is coming. That's all the time today for League Unlock. My name's Eric. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time.